My name is Alex, and for the past 15 years, I thought I had a stable, loving family. My wife Laura and I had what seemed like a perfect marriage, and our two kids, Emma and Noah, were the center of our world. We lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in a house we worked hard to make a home. My job in finance allowed us a comfortable life, and Laura stayed at home to take care of the kids and manage the household. We had friends, regular family outings, and a routine that, while sometimes mundane, was filled with warmth and laughter. Our community was close-knit, the kind where everyone knows each other. Weekends were often spent at neighborhood barbecues or kids' sports events. Laura was well-liked, always involved in school activities and community events. I took pride in my family and the life we built together. But looking back, there were signs, small, almost imperceptible cracks in the facade, that hinted at the storm that was about to break. It started subtly, almost innocently. Laura began to change. She was always outgoing, but suddenly her social calendar was packed with girls' nights and volunteer meetings that didn't quite add up. She'd spend more time on her appearance before heading out, wearing clothes that seemed more suited for a date than a PTA meeting. When I commented on it, she brushed it off, saying she just wanted to look good for herself. Our conversations, which once flowed effortlessly, became stilted. She'd be engrossed in her phone, smiling at texts she wouldn't share. When I asked, she'd say it was just friends or something about the kids' activities. I wanted to believe her, but there was a growing unease I couldn't shake. Our intimacy, too, began to wane. She'd be too tired, too busy, or simply uninterested. The woman who once eagerly awaited my return from work now seemed distracted and distant. I rationalized it, thinking maybe it was just a phase or the stress of managing the kids in the house. But the feeling of something being off gnawed at me. One evening, Laura announced she was going to a book club meeting at a friend's house. She was dressed impeccably, her makeup flawless, her excitement palpable. As she left, I noticed her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. A message from someone named Chris flashed on the screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight." My heart sank. Chris was a name I hadn't heard before. He wasn't part of our social circle, and Laura had never mentioned him. A quick scroll through her contacts and messages revealed nothing. It was like he didn't exist outside of that single text. When Laura returned later that night, her demeanor was glowing, almost euphoric. She kissed me on the cheek and headed straight to the shower, humming a tune I didn't recognize. The next few weeks were a blur of half-truths and growing mistrust. Laura's outings became more frequent, her explanations vaguer. She'd laugh off my questions or turn defensive, accusing me of being paranoid. I didn't want to believe she could be unfaithful. I loved her deeply, and couldn't imagine our life falling apart. But the signs were there, undeniable and relentless. Her phone, once left casually around the house, was now always with her, locked with a new passcode. She'd leave the room to take calls, her voice hushed, and then there were the unexplained expenses, dinners, gifts, and hotel charges that didn't fit our usual spending patterns. One night, unable to bear the weight of my suspicions, I followed her. She said she was meeting a friend at a cafe downtown, but her car didn't stop there. Instead, it pulled into the parking lot of a boutique hotel. I watched from a distance as she met a man at the entrance. They embraced, their familiarity and affection unmistakable. My world shattered in that moment, the truth glaring and unavoidable. Laura was having an affair. The discovery left me in a state of numb shock. The next few days were a haze, my mind replaying the image of Laura and the man at the hotel. I needed proof, concrete evidence to confront her. Doubts gnawed at me. What if I had misinterpreted things? But deep down, I knew the truth. I decided to gather evidence. Laura's phone was the key, but accessing it was a challenge. One morning, while she was in the shower, she left her phone charging in the kitchen. My hands shook as I picked it up, quickly entering the new passcode I had guessed from watching her fingers. It worked. The messages were there, a damning trail of deceit. Chris and Laura's conversations were explicit, filled with plans for their next meetings, confessions of love, and lurid descriptions of their encounters. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the evidence of their affair. There were photos, too, selfies of them together, intimate shots that made my stomach churn. Among the messages, one stood out. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Meet me at our usual spot." I noted the time and place, a clear opportunity to catch them in the act. Anger bubbled within me, mixed with a sickening dread. This wasn't just an affair, it was a betrayal of everything we had built together. That evening, Laura left the house, her usual excuses ready. She was going to a late-night yoga class, she said, and might grab a drink with the girls afterward. I nodded, trying to mask my emotions, and watched her drive away. As soon as she was out of sight, I grabbed my keys and followed. The usual spot turned out to be a different hotel, one on the outskirts of town. I parked discreetly and waited. My heart raced, a mix of fear and anticipation. Minutes felt like hours. But finally, Laura's car pulled into the lot. I watched as she met Chris, their bodies intertwining in a familiar dance. I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped out of my car, phone in hand, and approached them. My footsteps echoed in the quiet lot, and they turned, startled. Laura's face went pale, her eyes wide with shock and guilt. Chris stepped back, a mix of confusion and anger crossing his features. "What the hell are you doing here?" Laura stammered, her voice shaking. "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, holding up my phone. "I have everything. The texts, the photos. It's over, Laura." For a moment, silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Then Laura's demeanor shifted. Her guilt turned to defiance, her eyes narrowing. "You're spying on me? How dare you invade my privacy?" She spat, her voice rising. "How dare I?" I echoed, incredulous. "You're cheating on me, Laura, on our family. And you have the nerve to act like the victim?" Chris tried to intervene, stepping forward with a raised hand. "Hey man, calm down, this isn't the place." "Stay out of this," I snapped, cutting him off. "This is between me and my wife." Laura's defiance wavered, and tears welled in her eyes. "Alex, please, let's talk about this at home. Not here." I shook my head, the anger and hurt boiling over. "There's nothing to talk about. I want you out of the house. Tomorrow." She reached out, but I stepped back. "Alex, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Think of the kids." "I am thinking of the kids," I said, my voice cold. "They deserve better than this." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Laura and her lover standing in the lot. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, but one thing was clear. I couldn't continue living a lie. The betrayal was too deep, the wounds too raw. It was time to face the painful truth and rebuild my life, for myself and for my children. The drive home was a blur of emotions: anger, heartbreak, and a numb sense of finality. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. This was the end of our life together, the life I had cherished and fought to protect. But it was also the beginning of something new, something unknown and terrifying. The next morning I woke up early, my mind heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. Laura was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring blankly out the window. She turned when she heard me, her eyes red and puffy from a sleepless night. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but cold. "Now." She nodded, her hands trembling as she set down her mug. "Alex, please, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I held up a hand to stop her. "Save it, Laura. I don't want your apologies. I want the truth. How long has this been going on?" She swallowed hard, her eyes darting away. "About a year," she whispered. "A year?" I echoed, the word like a punch to the gut. "You've been lying to me for an entire year? While I was working to provide for us, you were off with him?" "It wasn't like that," she pleaded. "It started out innocent. We were just friends, and then, I don't know, it just happened." "Just happened?" I laughed bitterly. "You don't accidentally end up in a hotel room with someone, Laura. This was a choice, a series of choices." Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no sympathy. "I was lonely," she said, her voice cracking. "You were always working, always busy. I felt invisible, like I didn't matter." "And you think this makes it okay?" I demanded, my anger rising. "You think betraying me, betraying our family, is justified because you felt neglected?" "I'm not trying to justify it," she sobbed. "I'm just trying to explain. I was wrong, Alex, I know that. But please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through it together." I shook my head, the anger giving way to a deep, aching sadness. "There's no fixing this, Laura. You destroyed our marriage the moment you decided to sleep with him. I can't trust you anymore, and without trust, there's nothing left." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "What about the kids?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "How are we going to tell them?" "We'll figure it out," I said, my voice hardening. "But you need to leave. Today. Go stay with a friend, a family member, I don't care. Just get out." Laura's face crumpled, and she nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll go. But please, Alex, don't shut me out completely. Let's at least try to stay civil for the kids." "Civil?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "I'll do my best, but don't expect anything more." She stood up, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she were carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. "I'll pack some things and go to my sister's," she said quietly. "But I want to come back and talk to the kids. They deserve to hear it from both of us." "Fine," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "But not today. I need time to process this. We'll tell them together in a few days." Laura nodded, her eyes filled with tears and regret. "I'm so sorry, Alex," she whispered one last time before turning and walking up the stairs to pack. As I watched her go, a strange sense of relief washed over me. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I could start to rebuild my life without the shadow of betrayal hanging over me. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead was fraught with challenges, but I knew I had to keep moving forward, for myself and for my kids. Laura left that afternoon, a small suitcase in hand, and a look of defeat on her face. I watched from the living room window as she got into her car and drove away. The house felt strangely empty without her presence, but there was also a sense of peace, a calm before the inevitable storm of emotions and decisions to come. For the next few days, I focused on the kids, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Emma and Noah sensed something was off but didn't ask too many questions. I needed time to think, to plan my next steps. But as the hours ticked by, my anger grew, festering into a desire for retribution. Laura had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. I decided to take action. The first step was gathering more evidence of the affair to ensure that I had a strong case for custody and to protect myself legally. I contacted a private investigator, someone who came highly recommended, to dig deeper into Laura's activities and gather irrefutable proof of her infidelity. Meanwhile, I started plotting my own form of revenge. It wasn't enough to expose the affair. I wanted Laura and Chris to feel the consequences of their actions. Late one night after the kids were in bed, I sat at my computer, researching ways to hit them where it would hurt the most. Chris was a local businessman, someone with a reputation to protect. Laura, despite everything, still valued her standing in our community. I decided to create an anonymous email account and began drafting a message. It was addressed to Chris's wife, Michelle, whom I had met a few times at community events. She seemed nice, undeserving of the betrayal I now knew she was enduring. I included some of the texts and photos I had found, making sure to blur out any explicit content but leaving enough to make the point clear. My hands shook as I typed, a mix of anger and guilt washing over me. But Michelle deserved to know the truth, just as I had discovered it. I hit send, the email disappearing into the ether, and leaned back in my chair, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Chris had played a significant role in destroying my marriage, and he needed to face the consequences. The next step was more personal. I went to Laura's favorite social media platform and created a fake profile, befriending her friends and subtly spreading rumors about her infidelity. It was petty, yes, but I wanted her to feel the social isolation I felt, wanted her to see the whispers and judgment in the eyes of our friends and neighbors. A few days later, my private investigator called with an update. He had found more evidence, hotel receipts, additional texts, and even a few candid photos of Laura and Chris together. It was enough to build an ironclad case for divorce on grounds of adultery and to support my bid for full custody of Emma and Noah. Armed with this new information, I met with my lawyer to finalize the divorce papers. We discussed strategies, focusing on protecting the kids and ensuring that Laura's betrayal had as little impact on them as possible. My lawyer was confident, reassuring me that the evidence we had would be more than enough to sway the court in my favor. As I left the lawyer's office, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, anger, and a grim determination to see this through to the end. The confrontation with Laura was inevitable, and I steeled myself for the storm that was sure to follow. Laura returned a few days later, her demeanor cautious and subdued. She asked if we could talk, and I agreed, leading her into the living room where we could speak privately. "I want to see the kids," she said softly. They need to know what's happening. Not yet, I replied, my voice cold. First, we need to discuss how we're going to handle this. She looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. I know I messed up, Alex, but I want to try to make things right, for the kids' sake. It's too late for that, I said, handing her the divorce papers. I've filed for divorce, and I'm asking for full custody of Emma and Noah. You can see them, but it will be on my terms. Her eyes widened as she scanned the documents, tears welling up. You can't do this, she whispered. You can't take them away from me. You did this, I snapped, my anger boiling over. You destroyed our family, Laura, and now you have to face the consequences. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, but my resolve remained firm. I suggest you find a lawyer, I said, my voice steady, and prepare yourself for a fight, because I'm not backing down. With that, I left the room, leaving Laura to grapple with the reality of what she had done. The path ahead was clear, and I was ready to face it head-on. The days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings with lawyers, discussions with the kids, and emotionally charged encounters with Laura. We tried to shield Emma and Noah from the worst of it, but they were smart. They knew something was very wrong. We decided it was time to sit down with them and explain what was happening. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. Laura and I sat on opposite ends of the couch, the tension between us palpable. Emma and Noah sat close to me, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. Mom and Dad need to talk to you about something important, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. We've been having some problems, and we've decided that it's best for us to live separately for a while. Are you getting a divorce? Emma asked, her voice trembling. Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, sweetheart, we are. But that doesn't mean we don't love you. Both of us love you very much. Noah's eyes filled with tears and he clung to me. Why? Why are you doing this? Laura looked at me, silently pleading for help, but I couldn't soften the truth. Sometimes, grown-ups have problems that they can't fix, I said, trying to keep my voice gentle. It's not your fault. It's something between Mom and Dad. The rest of the conversation was a blur of tears and reassurances. Promises that we would both be there for them, no matter what. When it was over, Emma and Noah went to their rooms, leaving Laura and me alone in the living room. We need to talk, Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, Alex, can we try to work this out? I shook my head, the weight of her betrayal too heavy to ignore. There's nothing left to work out, Laura. You made your choice. Now we have to live with it. She reached out, her hand trembling. I still love you, Alex. I never stopped. I was stupid and I made a terrible mistake. But please, for the kids' sake, can't we try to find a way back? The anger and hurt inside me flared, but I forced myself to stay calm. Love? You call this love? You betrayed me, Laura. You betrayed our family. And now you want to pretend it never happened? Her face crumpled, and she began to sob. I know I messed up, but I'm willing to do anything to make it right. Counseling, therapy, anything. I looked at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything in the world, and felt a pang of sadness. It's too late for that. The trust is gone. Without trust, there's nothing left. Laura's tears flowed freely, her body shaking with sobs. Please, Alex, I'll do whatever it takes. Just give me a chance. I shook my head, the decision already made. I can't, Laura. I can't go back to the way things were. You need to accept that and move on. She stared at me, her eyes filled with a mix of despair and desperation. What about the kids? How are we going to co-parent if we can't even talk to each other? We'll figure it out, I said, my voice firm. For their sake, we'll find a way. But you need to understand that we're done. There's no going back. Laura wiped her tears, her expression hardening. Fine, if that's how you want it. But don't think for a second that I'm going to let you take my kids away from me. We'll let the courts decide, I replied, my resolve unwavering. And I'll do everything in my power to make sure they see how you've destroyed this family. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Laura to grapple with the reality of our broken marriage. The finality of our last conversation hung in the air, a painful reminder of what once was and what would never be again. The weeks leading up to the trial were grueling. Both Laura and I were entrenched in our respective legal battles, each determined to secure custody of Emma and Noah. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, was now a battleground of tension and silence. I spent every moment I could with the kids, trying to give them a sense of stability amidst the chaos. The day of the trial arrived, and as I entered the courtroom, the gravity of the situation hit me. This was it. The final showdown. Laura sat on the opposite side, her face a mask of determination and sadness. We were both armed with our lawyers and a mountain of evidence. The judge, a stern woman with an air of authority, presided over the proceedings. The trial began with opening statements. My lawyer, a sharp and seasoned professional, laid out the case against Laura, presenting the evidence of her infidelity and the impact it had on our family. The private investigator's report was detailed, leaving no room for doubt about the affair. Photos, texts, and hotel receipts painted a damning picture. Laura's lawyer countered with arguments about my long hours at work and how my absence had affected the family. They portrayed Laura as a devoted mother who had made a mistake but was committed to her children. It was a harsh reminder that the courtroom wasn't just about truth. It was about perception and strategy. The testimonies were the hardest part. I had to sit and listen as Laura spoke about our marriage, twisting the narrative to paint herself in a sympathetic light. She talked about feeling neglected and lonely, about how she had turned to Chris in a moment of weakness. It was painful to hear, but I knew I had to stay strong. When it was my turn, I recounted the events leading up to the discovery of the affair, the impact it had on me and the kids, and my efforts to maintain stability in our home. I spoke about the nights I spent comforting Emma and Noah, trying to explain why their mother had left. I could see the judge listening intently, weighing every word. Witnesses were called, including friends and neighbors who testified about our family dynamics. Some supported Laura, speaking about her dedication to the kids, while others sided with me, recounting the strain they had seen in our marriage and Laura's questionable behavior. After days of testimonies and cross-examinations, the final arguments were made. My lawyer emphasized the betrayal and the need for a stable environment for the children. Laura's lawyer pleaded for understanding and a chance for redemption. The judge announced she would review the evidence and deliver her verdict the following week. The wait was excruciating. Every day felt like an eternity, the uncertainty gnawing at me. I tried to keep life as normal as possible for Emma and Noah, but the tension was always there, a dark cloud hanging over us. Finally, the day of the verdict arrived. Laura and I sat in the courtroom, our nerves raw. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. She began by acknowledging the complexity of the case and the emotional turmoil it had caused. Then she delivered her decision. After careful consideration of the evidence and testimonies, I have reached a decision regarding custody of Emma and Noah. It is clear that both parents love their children and wish to provide for them. However, the evidence presented has shown that the stability and welfare of the children have been compromised by Mrs. Davis's actions. My heart pounded in my chest as the judge continued. Therefore, I am granting primary custody to Mr. Davis, with Mrs. Davis receiving visitation rights. It is my hope that both parties can work together to provide a supportive and nurturing environment for the children moving forward. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. I had won, but it was a bittersweet victory. Laura looked devastated, tears streaming down her face. Despite everything, a part of me still felt for her. But the damage was done. Outside the courtroom, Laura approached me. Alex, I know you hate me, but please, let's try to make this work for the kids. They need both of us. I nodded, the anger and resentment still there but tempered by a sense of responsibility. We'll find a way, I said. For them. As I drove home that day, Emma and Noah's faces filled my mind. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that would be challenging and painful, but also filled with hope. The trial had ended, but the real work was just beginning. The aftermath of the trial was a period of adjustment, healing, and rediscovery. With primary custody of Emma and Noah, I focused on creating a stable and loving environment for them. Laura moved into a small apartment nearby, and we worked out a schedule that allowed her regular visitation. Despite the bitterness and pain, we both knew that the kids needed as much normalcy as possible. In the months that followed, life slowly began to find a new rhythm. Emma and Noah were resilient, adapting to the changes with a strength that amazed me. They had questions, of course, and I answered them as honestly as I could, without painting Laura in a bad light. They deserved to have a relationship with their mother, and I wanted to support that. Co-parenting with Laura was challenging. Our interactions were often tense, and there were moments when old wounds reopened, but we managed to keep things civil for the sake of the kids. Laura attended therapy and seemed genuinely committed to repairing her relationship with Emma and Noah. I respected her efforts, even if I couldn't fully forgive her. One day, while going through some old boxes in the attic, I found a photo album from happier times. As I flipped through the pages, memories of vacations, birthdays, and ordinary moments filled my heart. It was bittersweet. A reminder of what we had lost, but also of the good times we had shared. I decided to keep the album, not as a way to hold on to the past, but as a testament to the fact that despite everything, there had been love and happiness. My own healing was a slower process. The betrayal had left deep scars, and there were days when the pain felt overwhelming. I continued to see my therapist, working through the anger, hurt, and lingering doubts about my own role in the collapse of our marriage. It wasn't easy, but with each session, I felt a little more at peace. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat on the porch, sipping a cup of tea and reflecting on how far we had come. The silence was comforting, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past year. As I looked up at the stars, I realized that I was starting to find a sense of closure. The future, once so uncertain and frightening, was beginning to look brighter. In time, I began to reconnect with old friends and even made some new ones. The support of those around me was invaluable, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this journey. I joined a local running group, finding solace in the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement and the camaraderie of others who understood the healing power of exercise and community. Through these connections, I met Rachel, a fellow runner and single parent who had also been through a tough divorce. We started as friends, bonding over shared experiences and mutual understanding. Rachel was kind, patient, and strong, a breath of fresh air in my life. As we spent more time together, our friendship deepened into something more. Introducing Rachel to Emma and Noah was a significant step, and I did so with caution, ensuring they were comfortable and reassured. To my relief, they liked her, and Rachel was wonderful with them, respecting their boundaries and gradually becoming a positive presence in their lives. Months turned into a year, and the new life we had built felt solid and real. Rachel and I continued to grow closer, supporting each other as we navigated the complexities of blended families and new relationships. We took things slowly, understanding that healing takes time and that building something lasting required patience and care. One sunny afternoon, while having a picnic at the park with Rachel and the kids, I looked around at the laughter and smiles and felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had been long and painful, but it had also led to growth and new beginnings. I realized that the betrayal, as devastating as it had been, had ultimately paved the way for a stronger, more resilient version of myself. Looking back, I saw that the experience had taught me invaluable lessons about love, trust, and forgiveness. I learned to value myself and to recognize my own strength. Most importantly, I understood that while the past would always be a part of me, it didn't have to define my future. As Rachel and I packed up the picnic and walked back to the car, hand in hand, with Emma and Noah running ahead, I felt a sense of peace and contentment. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to face it with hope and determination. The new life we had built was a testament to resilience and the power of moving forward. And as I watched my children laugh and play, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, stronger and wiser for all we had endured.